development, reality or an illusion? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Sisekelo. I promise to give you an interesting talk and absolutely changing perceptions on what I'm about to speak to you about. If I haven't done that at the end of the 18 minutes allocated to me, then best believe to never invite a 15-year-old to a TEDx event. Because in my culture, these things are for the average elders and the wise. Yes, I am 15 years of age, and many might wonder what a 15-year-old young boy would want to speak about to such a diverse crowd or audience. But that's where the answer lies, doesn't it? Diversity. Now, I'll need your help here. Would you please raise up your hand if you believe that the United States of America is more developed than, say, Lesotho? Okay. Now, we just took a quick vote on that, but do we know what development is? Imagine what development is to a young African child and what development is to a young European child. Although completely different things for their continents, with the African child wishing to see better infrastructure, better healthcare for his continent, whilst the European child wishes to see less pollution for his continent. Yet we then say one continent is more developed than the other, when in actual fact both are just striving for what they view as development. So what is development? Growing up as a young African boy, seeing buildings, skyscrapers, smooth highways, that was my development. I'd look at all the new infrastructure around me and assure myself that my country, and continent for that matter, was thriving. As soon as I arrived at a place with your smooth highways, your skyscrapers, that told me that that place was absolutely developed. I grew up in Swaziland, and every month I would long for my parents' payday, because to me, that meant that we'd be heading for South Africa. Now you might ask yourself why I long for that. Why did I long for that? To me at the time, South Africa was more developed than my own country, Swaziland. I had the chance to get what I couldn't get in Swaziland in South Africa, and that simply was McDonald's. But that was the case back then, 6-7 years ago. What is the case now? What is development nowadays? Are we still under the illusion that we're developing, even if we have human beings living under such conditions? Or is this development to the global population today? Today, there are many ways of measuring what we then call development. And now I pose another question to you. Do we consider an MEDC, formerly known as a more economically developed country, developed, even if the contentment of their population is low? If so, why? Is it because these MEDCs choose, and I mean choose, to only televise their industrial development aspects, such that we as the global population feel as if, hey, they are developed, and thus choose to not televise their human development aspect? Keep that in mind as well. You might be familiar with Swaziland's Vision 2022, which is basically a vision of the country of Swaziland reaching first world status by the year 2022. But I want to ask you, my audience, if you believe that Swaziland, in reaching its goal of becoming a first world country and thus being known as a more economically developed country, MEDC, will fulfill all factors which should then lead to what we should definitely be calling development? Or do you believe that we, the global population, will simply look at Swaziland's industrial and tech advancements and thus believe that, hey, Swaziland, you've earned it, you are first world status? Because Africa is deemed to be one of the least developed continents in the world, shall we then look at a few statistics? With the highest HDI rate sitting at 0.782 in Africa from the country of Seychelles, you might say Africa is developing, there's development in Africa. But then you look at the fact that the lowest HDI rate sits at 0.352, then you will definitely argue and say Africa is not developed. Your HDI rate is basically a human development index, which is one of many ways of measuring development, and one of the most advanced these days. It takes into account your education, the expected number of schooling years for a young dependent. Your HDI rate also takes into account your health, which is your life expectancy from birth. And lastly, your HDI rate takes into account your GNI, your gross national income, which is basically money which goes into your country. Because hey, a wealthy country is a more developed country. Looking at the fact that the highest HDI rate sits at 0.949 and is from the country of Norway, which is not in Africa, you will then argue and say Africa is not developing because the bottom 10 countries in your HDI rank are indeed African. Now, because of that, it might feel to you, the average human being, that Africa is not developing. So why does it feel as if Africa is not developing? I believe that we see these low rates, these very, very low rates of development in Africa, and thus believe that there is no development at all, when in actual fact there is development. I mean, take your HDI rate of 0.782 from the country of Seychelles, and definitely should tell you that there is development in Africa. There's also a problem whereby in Africa we see more industrial development, we see more skyscrapers, more highways being constructed, but we don't see more people being lifted out of poverty in Africa, and that's an issue. And to you, most probably feels as if there is no development in Africa. And then there's a last point where I feel as if African leaders, or Africans in general, are allowing for their non-development aspects, that there's poverty, which is a very, very big problem in Africa, to be televised and thus shown to the world. Such that to the global population, it feels as if Africa is not developing. It feels as if there is no development in Africa because, hey, how do you say that you're developing when you have people living under poverty? I want to answer the question as to why Africa is not developing. Why is Africa not developing? Corruption, corruption, corruption. I'm sure you've heard it all, everywhere. In newspapers, the radio, the news on the television. Corruption. And to you, it might feel as if corruption is just your African leader stealing money from your country. No. Corruption is from the bottom up. It's you, sir, you, ma'am, taking that bribe at work to make a decision that will make you more money. So, although our African leaders' decisions in terms of corruption does affect us more, it is not only just due to them, it is due to you, the working citizen. Why is Africa not developing? There's a brain drain that Africa will never develop to the average human being, and this is because of the low rates of development, right? So because of these low rates, most people are choosing to just leave Africa and go work for countries whereby they feel as if, hey, the HDI rates are higher, life is better there, when in actual fact they could be developing their own continent, Africa, because there is plenty of opportunity in Africa. I believe that there's an imbalance in your male to female ratio in leaders. I believe there are few female leaders in Africa, and maybe we should be having more. Globally, 5%, only 5% of your CEOs of Fortune 500 companies are female. Only 5%. Only 5%. And I believe that we need more. We need more because maybe corruption is coming from the male gender. That's not to be sexist, by the way. I know that there is, or it feels as if Africa is not developing, but because it feels as if it's not developing, it feels as if surely there is few development in Africa. And that is fortunately due to the non-corrupt leaders that we have. You might think that's in a few countries, but thankfully for those leaders, Africa is developing. Africa is also developing because of aid, because of help that we get from countries that we believe are more economically developed, such as China, the United States, England. But African leaders are not realizing, or the African population in general, not realizing that this is the new scramble for Africa. This is the new scramble for Africa. Africa is also developing as a whole because of aid as well from world aid organizations such as the United Nations, which help in lowering poverty rates in Africa. We get the United Nations giving us food, giving food to those living under poverty. Africa is also developing because of skilled immigrant workers, because skilled African workers thus choose to leave Africa. We then, as an African continent, have to recruit skilled immigrant workers from these MEDCs, which we believe that have skilled workers because of their education, right? But what we don't realize is that this causes a deficit or a problem for the economy of Africa, because we then have to offer competitive salaries such that these skilled immigrant workers choose and are forced to come to Africa because more money will not come. My last point, which I will end with today, is how does the African continent ensure future development? Sure, there are high rates of development, such as that in Seychelles, but how does the African continent ensure future development? Education. Education is key. And I think African education needs to shift into creating job creators than to create skilled workers. We need more businessmen, more businesswomen. Yes, we have a lot of businesses with 500 billion companies in Africa making at minimum $1 billion per annum. And I'll give you a quote here by Mr. Nelson Mandela, which says, education is the most powerful weapon you could use to change the world. Education. And with this education thus creating job creators for us, creation of jobs, better jobs, lower rates of unemployment, more people not living under poverty, and thus the global population shall say Africa is developing. But to do that, it is up to you, sir, you, ma'am. It is up to you to change Africa. It is up to you to create jobs. It is up to you to go out there and create businesses, make your businesses. So what is development? A reality or an illusion? Development could simply be having contentment within the population of your country, or that country in particular, or simply no contentment and skyscrapers, more industrial development. You choose. Thank you.